do enterprises need to build a strong foundation model, like an LLM, like an OpenAI, GPT-4? I think the answer to that is, for most companies, is no.
Welcome to a brand new episode of our podcast, Human and AI, Mind Machines and the Gradient Descent.
Thanks for tuning in to our geeky podcast to discuss the fascinating field of AI and machine learning, corporate craziness, passion for technology, and the role of humans. We are Ulli and Arberie, your hosts for this episode. And I guess, Ulli, do you remember the climate conference? It just wrapped up last week. So maybe let's shift the focus to buildings today.
Well, why then buildings?
Well, did you know that buildings contribute a whopping 37% of global yearly carbon emissions?
Really, that's an enormous chunk, isn't it? What else?
And that reduction targets are really crucial because over 75% of the necessary carbon emission reduction has to come from avoided demand, energy efficiency, or electrification of building systems.
That sounds already challenging. And then what about the regulations anyway?
Surprisingly, despite these facts, only 35% of countries have mandatory building energy regulations that dictate how energy efficient a building should be when constructed.
So that's quite a gap, is it? Right? But how does we bring now this number crunching from you into our podcast conversation today?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is it?
But let me introduce you to someone who's making waves in addressing these challenges. Colm Nee, CTO and product leader at Enlighted. Colm is passionate about understanding customer problems and solving them with modern technology. He's an innovative leader, driving the technical vision to achieve Enlighten's mission, and is particularly keen on creating technologies that benefit everyone and the planet. He's on a constant journey to be a better, more empathetic leader and considers quickly earned failures to be valuable learning experiences. Plus, he's an advocate for topics such as the future of work, sustainable technology, and climate change mitigation, and so much more.
Colm, that's called a Lobhudelei in Germany. That's a German expression for a marvelous introduction of yourself. So, hey, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Colm, becoming a CTO likely requires a deep passion for one's work. What specifically captivates you about your role?
The reason I joined Enlighted, I think, is still true today to a certain extent. I was working, going back a little bit in history, I was a data engineer and a data scientist within financial services. And the challenge I had with financial services is, the problems are really meaningful, right? The decisions you take and the products affect millions of people and their retirement. But I felt quite removed from the customer. And then I decided I wanted to change. I wanted to do something different. And I was looking around, and then I stumbled across Enlighted. And you had kind of this mixture of sustainability technology with a really practical application, so smart lighting controls. And you had this mixture of hardware, this software, this wireless technology. And I was just captivated by it. I said to myself, okay, I have to work for this company. And so I actually got hired by the founder of Enlighted, Tanuj Mohan, who's no longer with Siemens. And he was, again, a really passionate visionary and tech leader. And so I learned a lot from him. But I think as a CTO, you need to be passionate about not only the technology, but on the problems you're solving, because a lot of the challenges that I see people run into is they fall in love with the technology, they don't fall in love with the problem. But I think to have longevity in any role or in any industry, you've got to really fall in love with both. And the successful people really do fall in love with both. Yeah, so that's probably what I enjoy about my role. And I've been lucky that Siemens has continued to invest a lot in Enlighted's R&D. So we've been able to keep innovating and do some pretty interesting things.
So what is Enlighted in a 1 minute elevator pitch? What is the stake on Enlighted?
1 minute elevator pitch.
I'll set the timer.
Okay.
95, 98.
So
what? No.
yeah, I'd say Enlighted's a data company that solves problems at the intersection of people, space, and work. And we do this in two ways. The first is through our advanced lighting controls and IoT system, so a sensory system that not only uses data to make decisions on what's happening with the lights, on what's happening with the HVAC, but then also collects data about what's happening in the space to transform how operations are run in that space. And the second way we do this is through our occupant experience app, Comfy. And this really connects people to their workplace. So my elevator pitch would be, if you're a facility manager or a real estate executive who's trying to create a sustainable and energy efficient building, or you're looking to provide technology to help people get more out of their time in the office, then you should give us a call.
Well, that's
crisp.
2 minutes.
Yeah. So Colm, in the beginning, you already mentioned that what fascinates you or what you're passionate about is like that combination between tech and sustainability. And just a few weeks ago, Enlighted was actually acknowledged by Fast Company for its cutting-edge IoT solutions that help organizations to achieve their energy efficiency and sustainability goals. By the way, that's such a great achievement. What role do tech and sustainability really play at Enlighted? How does that come to life?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're hugely honored to be recognized in this way by the Fast Company. We're actually recognized, a little plug, as one of the 4 next big technologies in sustainability and energy for 2023. And sustainability is a huge part of what we do. And it's why a lot of our people choose to work for us. So look, you touched upon it in your opening, right? Buildings are big emitters of operational carbon emissions, which is probably what most people think about when they think about sustainability. They think about carbon, they think about climate change. And then, you mentioned some statistics, 37% of operational carbon emissions come from buildings. And that's definitely true if you factor in the embodied carbon and the full construction supply chain. It's actually really high. So it's a big problem that the industry is grappling with. And by the way, we humans need buildings to live in, to work in, and to connect in. So it's a problem, I think, that motivates all of us. I think the problem is a lot of attention goes into new buildings, which tend to be more energy efficient and have more modern technology. And of course, when you're building a new building, that's a good time to look at making it energy efficient. But there's a lot of building stock out there which is already built, and it's going to continue to be used, which means we will need to renovate a lot of the old building stock with energy efficient technologies. And it turns out there really aren't that many great ways to move the needle on energy consumption without avoiding unnecessary demand. So you spoke a little bit about that in your opening. And this means, turning off the lights when there's nobody in the building, optimizing the HVAC, so the heating, ventilation, and climate control system. Not powering plug loads, so devices that are in the space when there's nobody there. And so that's really where Enlighted comes in, because we're able to detect all of this with our sensory system. So a lot of the work we've been doing is really to make it easier to share this information across building systems. Mm-hmm. And then where we do control, so we control the lights, for example, to actually provide a technology which drives very high energy savings.
So this is a bit of contradictive to how I teach my kids, actually. I try to change and influence their behavior. And so like, if you leave the room, make the lights out, right? Or to turn down the heater or AC down and stuff like that, right? So would you say this technology will help, it's not about the human adopting the behaviors, right? Being more thoughtful with resources and also energy, right, in building, but it's rather, let's have small, putting it on an automation task rather, and say like, even though obviously both maybe have a role, I don't know, I'm happy to hear your views.
Yeah.
But it's putting, leverage in first place the smartness of buildings, turning them into intelligence, and at the same time human. Is that what I hear?
I think it's a mixture.
Okay.
And I think it's exactly the right conversation, because there's always a trade-off, right? So with energy efficiency, more often than not, that trade-off is comfort or convenience. And I think having the controls capability, so having a system which can actually make these decisions autonomously without a human having to take action. So let's assume humans have good intentions, right? And humans want to, provide, not use lights when they're not in the room, for example. Well, what happens if they don't? And that's where controls come in and automation comes in. And I think even, within the commercial space, it's a little bit different from your home, right? Where you make all the decisions yourself. In a commercial space, there's often different people that want different things. So one of the reasons why the Comfy app was successful initially was because, just small detour on history, the initial version of the Comfy app allowed you to vote on whether you thought a space was too hot or too cold. So you would basically enter your choice into the Comfy app, and then this would be used to dynamically adjust the HVAC system and adjust the level of temperature in a given space, right? And so one of the interesting things that we saw when we did this was that if you give people control and autonomy, you can also then change the profile of behavior. So just by giving people control, what we noticed is you could set the HVAC bounds, so which basically means the scope of acceptable temperatures for a human, you could make that wider, and that gave you energy savings, right? And it did so technically at the cost of comfort, but it also made people feel empowered. And so, when I think about this intersection between human comfort and automation, I think about systems like that.
Yeah, it's so important to have the people or the users in the loop, and that they also have a certain degree of autonomy to also decide like how the temperature, for instance, should be. So it's also like perceived probably more positively.
Though preference, so okay, human has a preference and can edit, configure something kind of aspects. So it's still a bit of thinking about what kind of preference you have and put it on controls, right? Though I guess that needs a lot of scales. It reminds me on smart metering, right? Smart metering effectively works then if you have the scale. So if you can, I don't know, have the demand forecast or the loads, right, which needed for energy demands in this case, if you have it at scale at your district or, even greater, that gives you actually really power of, moving the needle, I would say, in balancing the grid stuff, right? How do you see the parallels in, how many buildings, right, or squares or people, need to embrace that in order to really move the needle? Do you have any feeling for scale, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, we track our customers, and, we essentially in Enlighted, we have two brands, right? We have the Enlighted brand, which is the smart lighting IoT solution, and we have the Comfy brand, which is the workplace experience app. And so we know who our customers are. I think, though, to a certain extent, you're right. One of the big challenges for society to solve is how to really get scale in these technologies, because, even on the workplace experience side, I've given up trying to track how many software companies there are, very local ones often, that are trying to do something in workplace technology. And I think the problem that the industry is still grappling with is one of interoperability. So, and there are some pretty key reasons for this, but if you look at any building, there are a number of different subsystems. You have a lighting system, you have a HVAC system, you have a security system, and there are more. But these are the three main ones that every building has. And typically these are also procured by three different channels or through three different channels. So what that means is when you scale this up and look at different buildings, each one is kind of unique. So it's kind of like a snowflake. And even when you look at, single companies that own and operate a lot of space themselves, they'll choose different vendors for different buildings. And so what you end up with is a connection of snowflakes, which doesn't really scale. And this is where I think AI can play an important role, because what we're not good at doing in our industry is having these systems talk to each other in a coherent way. So sharing what they know about the building with each other. This is still a massive problem. And when I think about how we could use AI to apply to this problem of processing all this data and gathering intelligence from this data, simply to share information across different buildings, this is one way that we'll get to scale. We're not there yet, but the problem you described is real, and it's something that we're looking at with a lot of interest.
So that means the building misses the OPCUA momentum. Is that a bit of connectivity? But you touched already on AI. Let's talk a bit about AI. How do you what role does AI and machine learning play in Enlighted? How do you have a couple of use cases to share on the pipeline?
I mean, I think AI is so broad nowadays, and so there's just a lot of power in what you can do that it's hard to enumerate all the use cases. But one that I think about a lot in my role is the human aspect of sustainability, because when we think about sustainability, we think about energy savings. But if you go back to it and you ask yourself the question, okay, why are buildings still such a big problem with carbon emissions? It always comes back to humans and the decisions that humans are taking. And I think one of the underappreciated facts, just in general, but also applies to buildings, is that as a result of the global COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people left the workforce. A lot of people chose to take early retirement, and there wasn't enough people to replace them. And this was accelerating a demographic shift that is already happening. So it was already happening, but COVID accelerated it. And as a result, when I have the pleasure of speaking to a lot of customers in my role, and when I go there and speak with customers, it doesn't really matter what industry they're in. They're all telling me the same thing: is it's really hard to get the people. And so, it's interesting listening to the public discourse about AI, because a lot of it is, AI is going to steal all our jobs. But honestly, I take a little bit of a contrarian view on this, and that's that there's a lot of jobs that currently aren't done because there's not people there to do them. And they either don't have the training, or there's just not that critical mass of people. And so a lot of what we do at Enlighted is we really try and go beyond just, using AI to spit out facts about the building or even recommend things. We really try and go to automation. And so one of the customers that I spoke to recently wanted to use our real-time location services system, which is basically like an indoor GPS system, to automate the management of clinical equipment in a hospital. And the reason why he was so interested in this was because he had someone in his team, a domain expert, who was close to retirement, and he didn't have any way of replacing her, and he didn't have the budget to replace her. So he was looking to use technology to solve what is inherently a very human problem. So I think everything traces back to humans, and that's the common thread, whether we're talking about societal problems or we're talking about energy savings.
what you were also sharing is that you're in close touch also with your customers. And in the beginning, I also said that you're not only the CTO of Enlighted, but you're also a product leader. So I'm curious to learn more about what role actually user centricity or maybe lean startup methods play for you in your day-to-day job. And how do you actually approach product development at Enlighted?
Yeah, that's a really good question. User centricity is key. We literally have a product initiative this year, and we have 5, so I won't bore you with the others, but one of them is user-centric workflows. That's literally what it's called. And I think in general, when you look at building technologies, a lot of the software was developed over decades, and a lot of it was developed by engineers for engineers. Now, I'm an engineer by training, so I know I'm insulting myself here. But I think in general, when engineers make design decisions about products without having the right training, this results in highly configurable, highly customizable software that's very difficult to use. And so a lot of the focus in our user-centric workflows initiative is really to go back to first principles, do good old-fashioned user research, which is speaking with our customers, watching them as they're using our product, looking at how they actually interact with the product, putting instrumentation in our product so that we know when a user clicks on our software in a certain place, we know that that's happening, and so we actually know how they're using the software. Because a lot of the time, people will tell you something that's different compared to reality. So they'll tell you reality is a certain way. When you actually look at how they behave, you find out, okay, this is not aligned with what they were telling us. And I think the reason is, humans are good at finding problems, but they're less good at suggesting solutions. And really, that's what user-centric software development is about. It's about the solutions to the problems. So we do a lot on the user research side. We also hire product designers who constantly look at how they can redesign our software to make it more optimized and easier to use. And so that's a big investment for us, and I think it helps us differentiate from the competition as well.
How do you see, is it our clients and partners actually open to go in this direction with you? Because I don't know, if I said, give me the stuff and then I'll buy it, install it, make me work with integrators, right, to get it running, and I assume another feature, show me the dashboard or some kinds of app. And is that on a infrastructure? Is like our clients say like let's give 4 weeks, 3 months is whatever pace you are driving, 6 months is, right, in terms of to give insights, right, of their preferences, about their needs and stuff like this. Is this openness on the partner scale?
The answer to that's yes, for sure. People love giving their opinions, I found consistently in my life.
Okay.
And especially they love giving their opinions on things that they consider themselves to be experts in. And so whenever you have someone that's regularly using your product, one thing that amazes me is how much pride they take in using the product and on giving feedback on it. So I've never had a problem. There's a question of timing here, right? It's not, don't call me up when I'm busy with something else and ask me to fill out a questionnaire or answer a survey. So there's a timing element, but I've never. It doesn't really matter what the job is. People are always open to giving you feedback if you have a good relationship with them. And my only other comment was, we have different user personas for our software. One big one for us is installers, right? So we look at the product through the lens of an installer. So a customer might not just be an end customer, like a facility manager or facility operator who's responsible once the building's up and running. It also includes installers, and that's a big one for us because often what we're helping our installers do is be more capital efficient. So they're making more money if they're using Enlighted versus another product. So that's also a big focus.
All right. So speaking on technology adoption, I guess we're we're not able to jump over the big topic in current times, Gen AI, right? And you know, its initial application, at least on a public scale, ChatGPT. So what was the last thing you made with or queried with ChatGPT?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I think I asked ChatGPT the other day to explain the laws of thermodynamics to me in a simple way, because I'm not a physicist by training, but I'm really interested in science and on the physical sciences. So I studied mathematics at school, and I just wanted to know in layman's terms what were the laws of thermodynamics to understand another podcast I was listening to. And then I think the other thing I use it for regularly is I use it to generate images in my presentations. Rather than do a Google image search and then try and find something that fits, why not generate something that actually fits the story I'm trying to tell, even with a theme, right? So if you have the same characters in your story arc, very powerful and very, very impressive what you can do.
Yeah, nice one. So transformer architecture, so a bit of the basis of, large language models and foundation models, a bit of an overarching theme, energy-based models, stuff like that. It's not like last year, the November momentum, let's say, when public adoption came, right? So there were innovations along the line the last 10, 12 years, something like this. What was the game-changing element that somehow companies, but also executives, they're like, oh, this is dope. This is, I started Gen AI initiative. Do you have a sense of feeling? What was that?
I think you're right that the building blocks have been in place for a while now. So the question is, what changed? I think the open sourcing of Llama was big because that enabled one of these large language models, which with a huge number of parameters, for people to see this actually implemented and be able to work with this, that was huge. So that was a big technological impetus in the open source community for driving the change on the technology side. But, even then, if you look at the evolution of the GPTs, it wasn't until OpenAI added ChatGPT, so a chat interface to these large language models, that it really caught the inspiration of the general population. And so I think those two things combined, the open sourcing of Llama and the chat interface to these models, those were the two big things which enabled it to really, really take off.
Yeah, though, so accessibility seemed to be a great thing in terms of normal users can interact with complex machine learning architectures, stuff like that. I remember the discourse years ago with the first version of GPT also exposed, right, too hard to handle, right? Basically, right, too hard to, because it was already generating text element, and a lot of people I've talked to, they're doing summarization and explainability and headline generation and stuff like that. So still text generation stuff, let's say. There was also back in the days doable, right? And then everybody got the hipped and hyped on the very version and said like, okay, this will disrupt any business, right? And it will disrupt any, I don't know, from regex parser to whatever, aspects, to journalists are not safe anymore and stuff like these guys. And then 2 years basically zero. I felt like, at least on my personal note, right? I felt like zero. So how comes that, even though the capability obviously increased, but how comes that this was not adopting by enterprise? What hinders, and are we coming now at the same point that enterprise also with the new capabilities, what Llama or Mistrals or GPTs and what's on, right? Are they still not able to leverage this technology stack?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's been a shift in the mindset of executives at large enterprises, right? With ChatGPT and just the general applicability of what such a technology can do. So I remember reading that, with GPT-2, one of the initial big problems they were trying to solve was translation, right? Even though translation software has been around for a while, and there's been successful attempts at making that work. And so I remember reading that, one of the big breakthroughs considered in GPT-2 was you would give it 4 examples of language, so an English to French translation. And then you would use these, only 4 examples, to try and translate something that it hadn't seen before. And so it did this, and it did it in a pretty immature way. So it would probably have been better if you'd just looked up the words in the dictionary and done like a literal replacement. But I think there were 2 reactions to GPT-2. One was, wow, this is amazing. I've only given it 4 examples, and it's able to bootstrap and make an attempt at a 5th. And there were those people that said, well, actually, all you've done is create a really bad translator, right? And I think that's the Rubicon we only crossed with GPT-3 and above. Mm-hmm. That the people that were in the latter group, the skeptics, couldn't deny it anymore because of the performance of the model.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then in terms of enterprises adopting AI, look, enterprises tend to be slower. They have more to lose. They have bigger ships to steer. So I think there's really 2 problems in enterprises adopting generative AI. One of them is your classic data security, data privacy, IT problem that enterprises have a lot of capital stored up in their brand equity, right? And if you look at their market capitalization, a lot of it is brand equity, right? And that's the thing really they're trying to safeguard and optimize for is let's not destroy that because that's worth billions of dollars. And so they tend to go slower. And enterprises also tend to have people in roles who are, experts on cybersecurity, experts on IT infrastructure. And so all these things need to be aligned. And then I think the other thing that happens is there tends to be an internal fight around things at enterprises. So who owns generative AI at an enterprise is a question that needs to be discovered, right? And so is it owned by IT? Is it owned by the product lines? Is it owned by the business unit heads? So the answer for this might be different at different companies, or there might be a modus operandi that needs to be discovered there. And so for a startup, you don't have this problem because you just have less people that need to make a decision. Whereas at enterprises, it requires a lot of overhead to figure this out. So,
but that will mean it needs to be executive decisions moving further. If you say we are drowning into political discussions, left pocket, right pocket, or do and there, but if there's clear guidance on executive, like this is decision how operationalized, how maintenance, that it seems to be solvable, at least if executive would enforce it.
I think it is let's be honest. Large language models present such a unique business opportunity that regardless of, a lack of alignment escalating to an executive, it is an executive level problem inherently, is how to use such a powerful transformative technology to innovate within the company. So it starts being an executive level problem. And all I'm saying is in the layers underneath, people see the same opportunities, right? So people are really interested to get involved with this. And this is what leads to this kind of who takes the lead and how. But I truly believe that, maybe 10 years ago, data science and AI would have been more of a CIO topic. I think nowadays that's been elevated to being a CEO topic.
There you go, CEOs in the world, hear that? So the other aspect is obviously that the corporates have data, right? And we have, I guess, fallen again backwards to the aspects with the early machine learning aspects, where then it's like, okay, there are these open source models like YOLO for image and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And so then, apply to the industrial processes or to the individual use cases, and then it's like, okay, it's not going to work out, right? And then, more or less transfer learning, fine tuning, zero shot learning, these kinds of aspects which also fuel the innovation of transformer models, basically. So how would you recommend corporates moving further? When should they build their own, architecture? Are corporates actually ready for building own foundation models? Or how do we treat private, data or like confidential data, in these kinds of sphere? How do you leverage that effectively?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first place I would start is, do enterprises need to build a strong foundation model, like an LLM, like an OpenAI, GPT-4? I think the answer to that is, for most companies, is no. And, why is that? Well, I think a lot of what these large language models are good at is solving or giving information, regardless of what the problem is. And that doesn't really fit. That's overkill for a lot of enterprises because they have highly specialized problems. And so I think where a lot of the innovation is going to go with enterprises is on solving really specific problems, which, by the way, they've already been doing for decades now, using often very advanced machine learning techniques. With maybe a few exceptions. One is customer support. We at Enlighted, we talk a lot about how to meet our customers, how to answer their queries quicker and better. And I just think that a large language model trained maybe on some internal knowledge base that's private and not exposed to the outside world, this is already possible. And this is like 10x better than having someone have to respond to an email. So why wouldn't you do that? And so I think there are going to be parts in the business model that can be transformed using AI. I think none of this will involve creating your own large language model. There might be an element of fine-tuning here. And so I think fine-tuning right now from an academic perspective is still difficult without having to incur a lot of cost and actually generate a different model that then needs to be run by you, the enterprise. But I think in general, the innovation is going to go into solving really specific problems, which could be trained on a lot smaller data set.
Yeah, that could be very, very powerful. Also, like the example you just mentioned, like if those 10 people now would like suddenly have way more time to dedicate to, I don't know, to the very unique customer requests, for instance, and the customer would also get their answers way quicker. That would also like boost customer satisfaction and I guess employee satisfaction as well. I wonder how like software as a service was like a super like big topic, and now like with the rise of AI and AI being way more prominent, how do you think do AI-based data products actually compare with software as a service when it comes to business model attractiveness?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're less attractive. I think once you've captured something in SaaS, what is SaaS? You're basically trying to capture some deterministic workflow that exists probably in some Excel sheet or some clunky manual process, and you're moving it to the cloud so it's completely observable, completely repeatable. And the gains that come from this, you do it once and then you've done it for all of time. So then when you serve the next customer, you don't need to add a new developer. You just take what you've done and you scale it in the cloud, which is generally cheap compared to the value that you're providing, and you capitalize on that initial creation process. And yes, okay, software is never always living, so you need to constantly evolve it. But in general, it's incredibly attractive from a business model standpoint. AI is not the same. So first of all, depending on the use case, you might find yourself in the long tail. So you might find yourself really chasing those decimal points of accuracy for a certain outcome. Like if I'm imagining using computer vision in a factory over a manufacturing line, it could be that 0.5% higher accuracy corresponds to $10 million more of revenue per year. And chasing that accuracy is a lot more cost intensive from an R&D perspective. So even ignoring the fact that you need to collect a lot of data, train a lot of data, you also need to invest in the infrastructure around the models and on the accuracy, and this is very R&D intensive. And then I think the compute that's needed to support AI products is also more expensive. So I think it's a less objectively speaking, a less attractive business model. But the gains that can be had from AI for certain use cases take you way beyond SaaS. So maybe it's replacing SaaS for some use cases or for some workflows. So instead of having a workflow, you're completely automating it. This may be a bit of a tangent, keep me honest here, but I was thinking about, in using ChatGPT, how the Google search or the search workflow is going to change, right? So imagine right now, still for most people, what you do is you go open up Google or your favorite browser, you search for something like present for my 3-year-old nephew, right? So then you get taken to a website, you get 10 links, right, that you pick from, and you say, okay, this one feels appropriate. Then you go to some e-commerce website, you probably need to sign up for it, right? So there's this whole user workflow around signing up. So it could be by the time you've ended up finishing your workflow, it could be 50, 60 clicks that you've made. This is pure SaaS workflow, right? But imagine now you have an AI that instead gives you your top 3 options in the chat, and it makes a recommendation based on data that you don't even have access to on which one is likely to be the best option. So now you're going maybe to 1, 2, 3 clicks. And so in summary, AI might be less attractive from a business model standpoint, but it's incredibly disruptive. And so companies will need to invest in it.
That's such a cool example. And then in the chat, I could even type hey, I want a cheaper version or a yellow version or whatever. And then really that interaction also in the e-commerce space.
But what do you say? So Gen AI, so AI and platform business space gives us the personalization, fair enough. So if I go to shopping, it learns preferences, recommends me the white sneakers rather the leather shoes, right? Because it's hippish hype with current, preferences of clothing and stuff like that. Now with Gen AI, we're moving into an aspect that, it's not about learning the preference, but also it learns somehow to generate the content displayed to individuals. So previously we had the ad individualized for us, and now the content is even individualized. So it shows me the colors I like, it shows even the textual representation automatically generated, maybe. I don't know, I could envision to that. So it doesn't show me the blank, stock image white sneaker, but it says Ulli likes it behind a great Mustang car, and and stuff like that, and the news is the headline is even written differently, and it adopts my preferences. So do you see that Gen AI enables through this generation capability, not only recommendation capability, but generation capability, a sort of hyper personalization in the consumer world?
Absolutely, and I think if you're looking at so what businesses or what value propositions will be disrupted by generative AI. The one you mentioned, creativity, is a huge one. It is really, we were speaking about using ChatGPT to generate images in presentations, right? If I were to pay someone to do this, it would not only be very expensive versus the $20 I paid for 100 credits in DALL-E, it would also take a lot of time. So generating original content, whether it's images or even graphics. So imagining, the AR, VR, multiverse, right? I mean, who's going to create all of that content, right? 5 years ago, it would have to be a graphic designer. This is incredibly expensive. And so I think this is one of the great opportunities with generative AI is on that creativity space. And I think the other one is kind of this companion workflow where I already found myself trying to do it, by the way. I wanted to be able to develop a chat GPT that spoke in my style of writing, right? And I'm sure it's possible. I didn't find out a way of doing this. But this kind of personalization, even on the content you're creating, is kind of at the intersection between creativity and then having this companion that makes you more productive. So I think this is absolutely inevitable. And this has already been done via A/B testing. So companies will change on a small set of users certain workflows and then test how users respond. If you make this content more personalized, it will, of course, make it more compelling for you and make you more likely to do what the company wants you to do. And so this will absolutely be, I think, a huge area of investment. I'd be surprised, frankly, if it wasn't already with the large e-commerce companies that they were looking at that very problem.
You just touched upon like the creativity, hyper-personalization, more efficiency that you can also spark through the use of generative AI. So where else do you see the biggest innovation opportunities for now, as like next to the e-commerce space?
I think it's probably this Copilot area. It's actually no surprise that you've seen a bunch of products released called Copilot, by the way, because it's interesting. The technology has continued evolving over the last 10, 15 years to make us more productive as humans. You haven't really seen this emergence of a whole class of hyper-productive people. At least I haven't. I think part of the reason for that is we're still more consuming content than we are producing content. And I think one of the great opportunities with generative AI is more this Copilot. So, I as CTO, I also get these long email chains of, where someone's escalating something to me and they expect me to read through, 5,000 words of text.
You can't forget that.
Yeah,
No.
And so having being able to generate a summary for this, being able to automatically capture meeting notes. And yes, okay, it's not perfect and it's going to make mistakes. And maybe sometimes those mistakes will be more costly than others. But I think this is a tremendous opportunity for everyone to basically have their own personal assistant who helps them be more productive and get their work done so that they can focus on different tasks that they like doing, tasks that are more strategic. And so I think that's really the third pillar. And if you listen to, I recently heard Bill Gates speak about this, and someone asked him, what's the biggest business opportunity behind generative AI? And his response was a virtual personal assistant. So I think there's a lot to be done in that space as well.
Thanks so much for taking us on that deep dive on Gen AI and how you are seeing it and where the opportunities lie. But maybe coming back to Enlighted. By the way, we're currently even at Enlighted's office. It's pretty cool. What's the next big thing for Enlighted?
I mentioned we have these product themes. There's a few of them that I'm really excited about. One of them is that I think there's an opportunity to make our technology just more broadly affordable for everyone. So we're working on some, without giving too much away, we're working on some optimizations on the hardware side that will reduce the total cost of ownership from owning a system like Enlighted, so owning basically an advanced lighting control system that can also do IoT. So we're very excited about this. And then I think the other problem we're really focused on is making IoT more generally available to our customers. If you look at, why isn't IoT more adopted? Part of the reason for this is a lot of IoT solutions require their own infrastructure. So they need some kind of gateway, some kind of edge node that can basically take the data that the sensors or actuators are generating and bring it back to the cloud to then do some intelligence, right? And so if you're looking at it from a customer standpoint, depending on the use case, they might have to buy 10 or 15 of these systems to cover their use cases. And this adds up to a lot of infrastructure, right? Which then someone needs to manage. And so one of the ways we're trying to address this at Enlighted is, our sensors are everywhere, right? Where we deploy them, they're in every light fixture. So they're even better than the Wi-Fi system, which is the other way of doing this is, you try and collect this data through a Wi-Fi access point. So we have even better coverage than a Wi-Fi system. And so we're unlocking the capability of our wireless network, which today we use only for internal purposes. So we only use to do our own data services. And we want to unlock this to an ecosystem so that no matter what sensor or actuator you're trying to integrate with, you can pull that data over the Enlighted system, and then we make it available to you for whichever application you want to use. So that's something that we're very excited about. And the challenge with that is how do you do this in a standards-based way? How do you create an ecosystem around this? And then what's your business model when you're doing this? Because ideally we want customers to be able to recommend and bring their own devices without even having to involve us. So a lot of technology problems to solve in there. But I believe that, the market's slowly starting to adopt IoT. There was maybe a bit of a hype curve around this. I remember reading, I think back in 2015, that by 2024, and we're almost there, a quarter of the world's economy should be IoT related. And honestly, the reality of that is it's a small fraction of that. Mm-hmm. But I think we're slowly getting there. The technology is getting better. Battery lives are getting more performant. So instead of having to worry about a battery life of 2 years and what you're going to do to replace a sensor in 2 years, battery lives are now extending to 10, 15 years. And so it's making the technology a lot more practical.
So, and if you look then on a bit of the AI field, let's look in the future. What will be the next big thing in AI? Any guess? Any humble statement? Moving further, give it 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah.
8 years. Yeah,
so I think there'll still be a lot of investment in LLMs, right? And I don't believe we've reached any ceilings in terms of scaling. So there'll be investments in compute. So look at Nvidia's stock price. It's just gone through the roof. The reason is everyone wants their A100s and H100s and whatever products they're releasing. There'll be investments in making the algorithms more efficient because I think the transformer-based model architecture was a breakthrough, but it's still very inefficient. And also how the algorithms run on the hardware. We've really started to scratch the surface there. And I think there's still some innovation that needs to happen on the data side. So how do you make data available? How do you wrangle it quickly? And then in some cases, how do you generate data which can make your system better? But the one I'm really interested in is this notion of model-free reinforcement learning. So, a lot of the way AI works or machine learning works is you have some outcome that you're trying to replicate. Take the example of baking a cake, right? You say, okay, let's try and bake cakes, and then let's have someone to tell us whether these cakes taste good or not. That is not how humans learn. So when you're learning to bake a cake, hopefully you have a recipe. At least either your grandmother told you this is how you do it, here are the steps, or you actually have it written down, and then you quality control each step, right? And I think a lot of the models that are used to solve problems like chess or poker, and they can solve them really well now, are good because they actually take this multi-step approach. And the problem of winning a chess game or winning a poker hand can be broken down and enumerated into this multi-step process. But we need to do this in a model-free way. So we can't over-optimize on the problem of poker or the problem of chess. And so I think a lot of the innovation will have to come from how to take a complex multi-step task, which human brains are excellent at doing and learning how to do, and how do you break this down into a set of steps that can be assumed or done by a machine. So that's the space I'm watching carefully.
Yeah, looking forward to those kinds of innovations. So if you now reflect a bit of you by yourself coming from data science, from financial aspects, data crunching, moving further down let's say the corporate ladder, or let's say embracing more accountabilities and responsibilities in your job role, what would you recommend the younger generation? Any smart advices you would give them? Would you say like, hey, everybody should do data science now, or machine learning, or fuck it, let's do software stuff, but not data crunching? What is your younger generation tip here?
I think if you look at the evolution of software as a good example, right, and maybe a precedent for how to position yourself in a career, I lose track, honestly, of how many web technologies there are. It feels like every week a new one is being launched. And so I've always had a high level of empathy for the front-end web developer who has to balance a career in learning and managing all these technologies. I think AI is going to be a little bit similar in that there'll be different models, different techniques, different hardware. And so there'll just be this multiplicity of areas you can specialize in or focus on, and it will be constantly changing. There'll be models that we haven't even thought of right now coming out. And so being adaptable, I think, is probably the number one attribute for anyone considering a career in technology. And the advice I would give is, it's good to be passionate about the industry you're working on. So think about the applications and how it's actually going to be used. It feels like right now everyone, or not everyone, many people want to work for someone like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google.
Or Enlighted.
Or Enlighted. Well, I wouldn't put us in that category. But I think enterprises have a lot to offer here. And yes, they're a bit slower to adapt and to adopt technologies, but, we have all the data. And so I honestly think you could do a lot worse than choose to work for Siemens, because we just have so many interesting problems to solve. And, when I speak to people from across Siemens, it doesn't matter whether they're in DI or in smart infrastructure in the building product side, or they're working on smart grid technologies. The problems are there and they're relevant and they will affect everyone. And so circling back to the sustainability theme, one of the reasons why I'm really passionate to work at Enlighted and at Siemens is because of the problems. And I know that any innovations make a big difference to the world. So that's the other advice I would offer. And I don't feel like I need to tell the next generation this, because I have some family members that are younger, right? And they're just very passionate about causes and especially about sustainability. So I feel like this intersection between the two, between technology and meaningful applications of the technology those are my two bits of career advice. Find that happy intersection.
That's very beautiful advice, very deep as well. So Colm, thanks so much for your time and for inviting us to your office and for sharing your perspective. It's been so precious and we learned a lot. And before we finish off, we want to play our version of ChatGPT with you. And for the closing, I would like to give you a couple of sentence starters. So I have a couple of prompts and you will complete them. Colm, are you up to the last challenge?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. AI
is taking us from the era of widely available information to the era of widely available intelligence.
Ooh, that's a new one, isn't it?
Yeah,
a big one.
Philosophical. that's Colm GPT.
Today, here you go.
Enlighted is
a great place to work on big problems.
Here you go.
Tech for sustainability is.
Tech for sustainability is one of the biggest problems facing society, so it's a good place to spend your career in.
Beautiful. And last but not least, if I could invent one rule for everyone in the world to follow, it would be?
To be kind.
True. Colm, thanks so much for spending the time with us and sharing a bit of your insights and your views on the role of, not only Siemens stuff, but also a bit of the perspective of the technology trends and, where the field is moving. We really appreciated your time and understand, you carved something out of your busy schedule.
Great. Thanks. I had a great time.
All right, folks, and stay tuned. There's so much to come. Stay bold, committed, and open-minded, and we'll hear us at the next Siemens AI Lab podcast. Cheers.